good afternoon, almost good evening, I guess, is it?
Yes, good evening.
Good to see you, Karuna. Welcome to our Leaders Who Care video conversation series.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. You got a great story, and I want to be able to share it with everybody. And like one of the anchors on one of the I think it's Stephanie Rule says, "Let's get smarter." It's kind of cute. So, but no, really welcome. You do have a great story, and you're working for a company that I'm certainly really interested in. That's, I think, doing some really cool stuff in this era. And so why don't we start by, if you could briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll chat.
All right. My name is Karuna Rawal. I am the CMO currently of a company called Nature's Fynd, which is a food tech company that's bringing a new to the world sustainable protein to market. And I am fortunate enough to be able to be the brand builder and storyteller for the company, which is basically who I am. So my story is really about from the beginning of my career to this day. I've been in a lot of places, but I think the consistent thread is about really being a storyteller and a brand builder, and being able to really think about bringing human insight and brand insight and finding that intersection so you can really use that to tell the story of a brand. So I feel very fortunate because I've had a career where I've been able to learn from the best. I started my career at P&G and was fortunate enough to have Jim Stengel as my first boss, who, as most people may know, is the former CMO of Procter Gamble. And nobody better to have as a first boss. And then I was fortunate enough to have Chip Bergh as my second boss, who's now the CEO of Levi Strauss. So I had a real opportunity at P&G to really understand the role of business and the role of marketing and how it can change the world. So carried that with me throughout my career. From P&G, I went to do some consulting. So spent some time really largely in food and beverage, working with companies who were doing innovation, particularly in health. So spent a lot of time helping companies figure out their strategies. This was quite a few years ago when they were just starting to think about, maybe a Twinkie isn't the best thing, but really starting to think about how to bring healthfulness to food. And then from there, actually made sort of a unusual turn to the agency side and went to Leo Burnett. Where I had the absolute fortune of working on probably the highlight of my career at the agency was working on the Always Like a Girl campaign, which was a real opportunity to, the brief there was really change the world one girl at a time. And so had a real opportunity to take that brand to new heights, which then brought me now to my latest adventure. But as I said, all along, it's been about, how do you build a brand? How do you tell a story? How do you connect with, we shouldn't call them consumers now, but how do you connect with people? More and more, I think that's the challenge for brands today. So beyond that, I'm a mother of 3 wonderful children, and both empowering girls and empowering children is a particular passion of mine. So I do a lot of work in that space in the nonprofit arena with UNICEF, with Cradles to Crayons, which is a local organization, as well as with the Children's Hospital here in Chicago. So,
all girls? 3
that's
girls?
me.
You have 3 girls?
I have 2 girls and a boy.
All right.
Yeah. So.
Well, is the boy in the middle, or where is he?
He is in the middle, so he's surrounded.
He's surrounded. Well, could be worse. There's no doubt about it. Could be worse. No, that's beautiful. Are you from the East Coast? Where are you from?
I was born in India. I'm the daughter of a Indian diplomat. So I actually grew up living in different parts of the world and came to the US when I was 9 years old. And so came to New York City and actually grew up in New York City, went to college on the East Coast. And then really it was P&G that brought me out to actually business school at Kellogg, and then P&G brought me out to the Midwest, and I've been in Chicago for a very long time now.
And it's almost winter.
It was snowing this morning, just so you know. Not much, but it was snowing.
Well, it looks good at Christmas a little bit.
Yeah, we usually have white Halloween, so that's what we're going for.
That'll be cool. I can't wait till we get to your influencer question, because it sounds like you named a few already in your preface there. So we'll get to that. You know, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but you know, like Simon Sinek always talks about the why, but I'd like to ask a little bit different. Why do you do what you do?
What I think is the main purpose and why, my North Star, you're right, I'm a big fan of Simon's. I think it's really about the impact and influence that I can have as a leader, and more importantly, as a human being for you know, the world today and generations to come. I think that's always been you know, a passion of mine to figure out how can I, whatever role I'm in, how can I really try to figure out a way to expand that sphere of influence and to increase the impact that I can have in a positive way, not just on the brand and the consumer community I'm working with, but beyond that on the company. A lot of my energy over the years has gone into really supporting and mentoring diverse talent, helping leaders succeed. You know, on the agency side at Leo Burnett, I was known as one of the leaders who had probably the most working mothers, which is not an easy thing to do on the agency side, but really trying to figure out how to make you know, we spend a lot of hours working. And so for me, a great leader, and I've been very fortunate to have worked for several of them, a great leader can really make a difference in how excited you are to come to work every day and how happy you are going home every day, which is just as important. So that's really my why is, and like I said, I'm a huge fan of Simon's, and I think he talks a lot about how leaders can really make such a huge difference.
Yeah, he's right on. I think he's brilliant also. And you're right, we spend so much time at work, whether now it's remote or not, but just at
Yeah.
and not to state the obvious, but if you're happy where you are, a lot of positive things will happen,
That's right.
all the way around, including well-being. And the worst thing in the world is for people to feel Sunday nights coming and they're not happy about it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know, you'd really relate to this. It's really taken, and I've seen this just being good part of my career in the executive search, talent, leadership development arena. It's taken decades for leaders to realize that aligning themselves, their brand, who they are, with some kind of social, environmental, some kind of impact is actually good for business, right? And not to mention it's good to attract talent, which was not that long ago. They finally realized to get the great people, you actually have to have some purpose in what's going on. So to say you know a little bit about branding, obviously, is a major understatement that you've been involved in. Share with us what that's like, how it's evolved, branding in itself, and including your thought process. And as you're now especially engaged in a little bit of a different scenario for you, there's similarities obviously, but different scenario where you really are making a positive impact in the well-being for people, for communities.
Yep. So I think you're right, and I've been in branding long enough to actually see this evolution through the course of my career. So, you know, but I think back to when I was at P&G, you know, not that you know, thinking about the community and social impact wasn't important. It wasn't integral, right? It was we would do an event, we would do, you know, align with a cause, we would do things that certainly were good efforts for the brand, but they weren't integral. They weren't the foundation that the brand was built on. And so that was kind of the early years. But, you know, what I did learn there was really this focus on, you know, at the end of the day, you really are about meeting and exceeding consumer needs. And it's so important to listen to consumers. And that is something that stayed with me throughout. So as I then transitioned from P&G to the consulting work, a lot of the work I did in health and wellness was really around seeing where the consumer was starting to evolve to, and how do you bring that insight back into branding. And that's where, you know, questioning like, okay, should we maybe have a healthy option? Maybe we're not going to completely change the brand, but should we offer consumers more choice and more alternatives, because ultimately they can decide. And I think what's really starting to shift is consumers' voices are becoming more and more clear. They're voting with their pocketbooks, right? And ultimately that's what, I'm sad to say, but not everything changes because of just benevolence. It changes because there's a marketplace dynamic that is being responded to. And so I think and then we kind of saw this era of purpose, and Jim Stengel, my old boss, is a big proponent of, you know, he's looked at a lot of data that shows that brands with purpose actually grow and deliver better financial results than brands that don't. And so I think, a lot of the time that I spent on the agency side was working with brands, trying to figure out, like, how do we now go find a deeper purpose than just, we're not just selling feminine protection. What are we actually selling? Well, we're about female empowerment. I mean, and a lot of them had, we're enabling women to go live their lives. We're enabling girls to get an education. We're enabling them not to miss school. I mean, so as you start to dig deeper and really understand what the brand could truly stand for, that's when you start to see this evolution around purpose. And I think, and that's where really the Like a Girl work that I did came to life, because it was really about going back to that deeper purpose and saying, okay, if we're about empowering girls, what are all the things that are getting in the way of girls feeling empowered? Obviously, we can solve one of those things, but that's not it. Like, they live in a broader context than just our brand and our category. And I think when we started to do that work is when we uncovered statistics like, girls lose twice as much confidence as boys, when they go through puberty, and it doesn't often come back until they reach the age of 70. And you think about all that diminished potential in all those years, and how do you change that? And as we started to talk about what are all the things that are driving it, we started with this idea of language and the words that are used and how much impact they have. And then obviously the campaign has continued to build on that. So that was where you saw this era of taking purpose, and Dove did it. And there's a lot of other brands that have done it, of taking purpose. Nike talks about the athlete in everyone. So there's all these brands that are trying to do that. And I think what's interesting for me in my journey now, I'm at a point where literally I was given a blank sheet of paper and said, okay, this is what we have. How do we go build a brand? And for me, that started, with this very core of what are our values as a company? Because I'm not going to go build, if anybody had said to me, you could go write this book, it would be start with the foundation. The company has to have the right values, and that's what we build the brand on, because we can't be we're not in a world anymore where we don't walk the talk, right? We have to really, and it's been really amazing. So we spent the time to build our values, to build our purpose, to build our mission. And all of those, obviously it helps to have a product that's actually designed to do that work. But I think, there's still brands that, I think if you don't go through the exercise of really understanding what you stand for, because you can have a great product, but not be a great company, right? I mean, and those things have to be tied together. So that's the evolution I think we're seeing. And I'm very fortunate to have found an opportunity now to actually bring all of that together and bring something to market that I think genuinely is better for, as we like to say, better for people and better for the planet.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because it's food, and so it's more direct that that you can do that. And I told you I just watched this documentary called The Corporation. They talk about the evolution of what the corporation is, and then a corporation is defined as a person in law right now.
Yeah.
But how do you? I'm just wondering, with you can't touch a company, you can't touch a brand per se even. What's your thoughts on how does a company distinguish between their brand being their people versus this thing you can't touch that they're putting out there?
Right. Well, brand is, you're right. I mean, it's an intangible asset, but I think it is something that has a lot of value. And I think how a brand behaves. I mean, we talk about a brand just like, as a corporation as a human being, we talk about a brand as a human being. How does it talk? How does it act? What kind of people represent the brand? Where are we? Who do we partner with? All of those things say something about the brand. And I think more and more we're seeing consumers say, I want a brand that has alignment with my values. I have children who are all, in that Gen Z to, early millennial group, and they all understand a lot more about the companies that they buy from than I think I did growing up. To me, it was about the product. For them, it's about who is the company, how are they treating their employees, how does the brand show up, what kinds of things does it stand for. So all of those things I think become really important because there is so much transparency. It's so easy for me to research anything I want before, even small purchases, I can find out a lot about the company and what they stand for. So I think it's, as a marketer now and actually as a business leader, you have to be very clear on that. You have to be very transparent, and you have to you know what, you have to change the things that aren't working. You have to be willing to say, this doesn't fit with our brand. And we have those conversations. Does this fit with who our brand is? And is this what we want our brand to be? So it is like a person, and you have to manage it in a very careful way.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's always been I had one executive tell me recently, he said, Mark, I really do care. And I believe he was being sincere, really does care. But it seems like the minute I get the quarterly financial results done now, I'm already having to work on them and do stuff and make decisions for the next quarterly financial results. And I wish I had more time and more everything to do it. And he said, that's why I thought he was sincere. He said, it's not an excuse, but it's a problem that if I want to really make an impact, how do you get around that? Because let's face it, some leaders are either forced or that's all they care about is the dollars. It's been that way for a long time. Now it's changed dramatically and need more. But how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I just had a conversation this morning with my CFO around the same topic, right? So I think for me, a lot of it has been about literally making the CFO my best partner in crime. The more I can educate him in this case, but you know, at the agency, it was you know, the CFO, I worked with her very closely. The more they understand about what we're trying to do, because we don't speak the same language inherently. So I think it is, but we do, you know, if we both bring that broader business perspective, I think that's what really helps. So it's always a back and forth, and you know, he's pushing me constantly to say, what are you going to deliver next quarter, next, you know, and I'm saying, okay, some of this brand work is an investment in the long term, and so it is an ongoing. And I think part of the marketer's job is to educate, and I think the CFO's job is to push and make sure that we're not just, you know, you have to balance the long-term brand building with the short-term performance. I mean, that's just the reality of business, and we all know it. But what I find exciting at this time, I feel like the two are starting to come together more so than I've ever seen before. So I think our consumers, you know, when we did I'll give you a perfect example, when we did the Always campaign, I mean, there was a lot of naysayers who were like, oh, this is, I mean, you don't even show the brand name until the last, you know, frame, and you don't ask people to go buy it. Like, how's this? And what we ended up seeing, because people felt so passionately about what we were saying about the brand and what we stood for, we started to see, I mean, we built our market share, we built our volume, we built sales, we built our brand equity, we did all of it. And it just was you know, and again, that's magic, right? When it all comes together, and you hope to do that many times in a lifetime, but I think it can happen. What that experience showed me is it can. If you do this right, it really can. And there's some amount of patience required on the part of the CFO, and I think there's a sense of urgency required on the part of the CMO. So they have to kind of come together.
Yeah, it's a tightrope, and but I think you're right. We're moving in that direction. There's still a lot of work, you know, to be done. In fact, we were talking to David Beasley of the World Food Program, and he was saying he'd like to see a lot more private sectors think longer term. And maybe take a little less return at the beginning, but it'll be a better return long term in whatever the program is, and it would help a lot in the world for everything that's going on right now. So I think you're on the money. You know, I compare a lot of things to sports, and I always bring up the story where the owner tells the coach, if you don't win this year, you're fired. What is he going to do? He does everything to win this year and doesn't care about anything else. That's not what you really want, obviously.
And I think that's what we've seen for a long time in business, and with, you know, lots of iconic brands that haven't been managed for the longer term. And I hope, I'm optimistic that era is coming to an end. I think if anything, you know, this last 8 months has really shown a light on lots of brands to really, you know, to come forward with what they stand for and what they don't, and how they are going to have an impact. So I think brands are going to, and businesses are going to be held to that standard going forward. I really believe that, because it's a new generation coming up that's going to make a difference.
No doubt. And they don't want to buy from one nor work for one that doesn't have that.
Exactly. And the work part is really important too, as we think about our talent. You know, and I have, on the agency side, I had lots of young people working for me, and similarly now on my team. And it's very, very clear. I mean, my own kids, I see the choices that they make. I mean, they don't want to work for somebody that, you know, doesn't have the same values or the values that they're comfortable with. And I think that is different. Whereas, you know, I was just thrilled to get a job. And so it is a big, and so I think we're going to have an issue with talent if we don't figure out how to do this.
No, I totally agree. I see it every day in one of our core parts of our business with search is that I saw it recently again with women where there was one just said, I don't want them to tell me that they care about me. They can tell me that, but I want to see that there's specific programs they have in place that actually prove it. I want to know that, well, she told me this, I want to know, will I be allowed to get on that big project and show my stuff? Not just do my job description, but get on that big project and show my stuff.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to advance. It'll just be another person. So
yeah,
it is right on. So you gave me a good segue to the next question, although that topic could go on for an hour and a half easy, I think. So my grandparents were from Kiev, and my grandfather, both of them were like influencers to me big time, but they would always say with a Russian accent or Ukrainian accent, if you will, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing. That's what they would say. And then they say education is second, but and they meant it. That wasn't a branding or a slogan. They meant it. So we got COVID, we got technology going super fast still. We've got racial justice. We got a lot of things going on. Mother Nature is not a happy person right now. Do you see then, you kind of referred to it a little bit, an awakening of people in general, seeing like what's really important to them now?
Yep. No, I think, if the last 8 months has taught us anything, it's forced everybody, I think all of us as individuals, but also companies, brands, to really take a look at what's important, what are the right things to be focusing on. I think everybody's going through that, and we're going through it collectively all at once across the world, right? So I think that's absolutely true. And I think the thing that we have to keep our eye on, I'm also concerned, as I just read the stat on 850,000 women dropped out of the workforce in the last couple of months. And it's, that's really concerning because we need that diverse talent, and they're dropping out at, significantly higher rate than men because they're juggling all the responsibilities of being at work and working from home and managing the childcare and everything else, as they've done. But now it's like, everyone's working 60 hours, right? So we can't get any separation. So it's made it, the lack of childcare options, the lack of school, all of that has made it really, really challenging, I think, for working mothers. But similarly, I think we have to think about people in their whole lives. And I think for too long, we've sort of, compartmentalized everything. And I think this has forced us to see, that people's lives aren't in a vacuum. They don't just bring their best self to work when, they've got a childcare crisis. And I remember that. I mean, the most stressful times as a working mother was when my childcare would fall through. And, my husband and I would, because we didn't live anywhere near our parents, I'd have to fly my parents in because we both had to travel and there was no, our childcare option had fallen through. Yeah. That's such a stressful demand on anybody who's working. And so understanding, and I'm sure it's not just working mothers. I mean, every employee has their own set of challenges. And I'm hoping what this will do is make us all much more aware of everybody's, physical, emotional, and mental well-being, and we'll take more time. I know as a team, we are taking a lot more time to talk to each other, to hear each other, and to make sure that everybody's doing okay. I mean, that's a lot of, as my job as a leader, I connect with my team every single day to make sure everyone's doing okay.
I think that's brilliant. I'm sorry to interrupt. I think that's brilliant. And you kind of went to the next step I was going to say with, what do you think business leaders who care, what do you think their role is to ensure what I call the three well-beings, the financial, the physical, and the mental well-being? But to your point, I interviewed the former vice chairman of Royal Bank of Canada, and he's now a senator in Canada. And he would have all his people, he told me, in his area, spend a half an hour walking around and actually sitting in the office of each person, even if it's for a minute. Don't stand there. He said, sit down and say, how are you doing? Yeah. The guy, they'll say, well, I don't have time. He said, that you got to make time for, because there's so much that happens, even if it's a minute. And I was really amazed when he said, don't stand there and ask him that. Sit down in their office and ask them that. Yeah, no, that's something I learned as well. Having watched great leaders spend that time, I think it really, really makes a difference. And what I think is important for leaders is as you think back to the great bosses you've worked for, and this is something that I've realized myself, the things you remember about them aren't
God, they wrote that great presentation, or, it's what they did as a, who they were as a human being and as a leader that leaves its lasting impact. So I try to always keep that in mind. And I've had, women who have worked for me, men who've worked for me, years later, they'll recall something that is often, I didn't realize how much of an impact it had, but it was a personal, you took the time to ask me about, my kids when I was going through a hard time. You made sure that you checked in on me when I wasn't doing well. Like, those are the things that you remember about great leaders and great bosses, that they see you as a whole human being. And so I think I hope that's what comes out of this for all of us. I think a lot of people do that, intuitively, but not everybody does. So I think it's a skill that we're all going to have to learn.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, my favorite quote from Maya Angelou was the one that ends with, most people will remember how you made them feel.
Exactly.
And she's right on the money.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. And I was on a broadcast with some people the other day, and they asked me about an intelligent follower. And they were talking about leadership. And we came to the conclusion, which we talk about a lot, that it's actually easier to be a vulnerable, I don't know everything, but I just care about you leader versus the other way. It's, it's kind of like it takes more muscles to frown than smile. So why are you frowning?
Right. Exactly.
It's crazy. Hey, one last little question. If you could give a piece of advice to that infamous graduate who boyfriend or girlfriend's ticked off because they didn't have prom and they didn't get all to have all the fun and this and that and the other, and the world's like all over the place, what would you tell them if they asked you, what now?
Right. That's a hard one, right? Because I have several of my own two that 2 out of 3 children who have been advising on that very thing. I think it's really going back to who you are and what your passions are, and try to hold on to that, because I do think things will settle down. But if you can identify and as quickly as possible find a place where you can pursue that passion, where you can have influence and impact, I think there's nothing better. Loving what you do every day, when we spend so much time doing it, I think is important. And sometimes you don't figure that out right away, but it's a journey. And so wherever you land, I think about how do you have a bigger impact, because you can do that no matter what job you're in. And how do you have a bigger influence? And it's about just continuing to expand your sphere of influence, because the world needs you, and the world needs more people who can do more than what the job says. So I think people will be waiting for you with open arms if you can figure out what it is you're passionate about, and you can bring that to your work and your job every day. I think people are going to be excited. I know as a leader, that's what I'm always looking for.
Well, you definitely are a leader who cares, and it sounds like you're raising the upcoming ones too. So
trying.
So please do. We thank you for that, because we definitely need more leaders who care. Hey, thanks so much for participating and joining us. It's really great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.